The forged signature stared back at me from the notarized document, my name written in handwriting that wasn't mine. 3 months of my life had led to this moment of sitting in a lawyer's office, holding proof that my own family had erased me from existence, legally and deliberately. I set the document down on Robert Harrison's mahogany desk and looked up at the silver-haired attorney who had been waiting 15 years for me to walk through his door. So, I said, my voice steadier than I felt, where do we begin? But to understand how I got here to this moment of reckoning, you need to know about the morning it all started to unravel. The morning my mother threw scalding soup across my face and told me to get out of the house I had helped pay for. Flashback. The breaking point. 3 months earlier, I woke up in my childhood bedroom at 5:47 a.m., 13 minutes before my alarm. The house was quiet in that heavy way that meant everyone was still asleep, but something felt different. Wrong. I lay there listening to the familiar sounds, the old furnace clicking on, the neighbor's dog barking its morning routine, the distant hum of early commuters on Highway 50. My name is Margaret Williams. I'm 52 years old, and for the past 15 years, I've been the backbone of Campbell Market, the grocery store my father built from nothing in 1973. I have a degree in business management, a head for numbers that my father always admired, and until that morning, I believed I had a family that valued what I brought to the table. I was wrong. I patted downstairs in my socks, the hardwood floors cool against my feet. The kitchen still smelled faintly of last night's garlic bread and the lemon oil I used to clean the counters. Twice. I had cleaned them twice, not because they needed it, but because I needed something to do with my hands while Patricia, my mother, explained why Jessica, her stepdaughter, would be joining the family business in a more official capacity. That phrase had echoed in my head all night. Official capacity. As if the 15 years I'd spent rebuilding the store after Dad's stroke, modernizing the inventory system, securing the contracts that kept us afloat during the recession, as if none of that had been official enough. I started the kettle for tea. Patricia always got the coffee machine. That had been established years ago. I was buttering toast when I heard her slippers shuffling against the stairs. She appeared in the doorway wearing her faded blue housecoat, her gray hair pinned back with bobby pins that had seen better decades. Behind her glasses, her eyes were already sharp and calculating. It was 7:15 a.m., and she was ready for battle. "Good morning," I said, keeping my voice neutral. She didn't respond, just sat at the kitchen table and waited for me to serve her. I set down her oatmeal bowl, the blue ceramic one she'd used for as long as I could remember, and poured her orange juice. The routine was so automatic, I could have done it blindfolded. "Jessica will be here at 10, she said without preamble. "She needs your car today." I froze, my spoon halfway to my mouth. "My car? You work from home now. You don't need it during the week." She spooned oatmeal into her mouth, chewed loudly. "And she'll need your credit card. Just until she gets on her feet with the business." The business. Our family's grocery store had become the business, and somehow I wasn't part of it anymore. "No," I said quietly. "I'm not giving her my car or my credit card." Patricia's eyes narrowed behind her glasses. "Don't be selfish, Margaret. Family helps family." "I've been helping," I said, setting down my spoon. "I've been helping for 15 years. I helped when Dad had his stroke. I helped when we almost lost the store in 2008. I helped when you needed the mortgage payments. I think I've helped enough." She stood up so quickly her chair scraped against the floor. "You think you're better than her, don't you? With your college degree and your fancy computer work. Jessica is trying to build something. You're just hoarding what you have." I kept my voice level, though my heart was racing. "I'm not hoarding anything. I'm trying to survive. And I'm trying to protect what Dad built." "What Dad built?" Her voice rose to a pitch I knew meant danger. "You mean what I built? What I've been building since he died. You think because you went to Sacramento State for 4 years you understand business better than I do? I think," I said carefully, "that I've been running the day-to-day operations of Campbell Market for 15 years. I think I've earned the right to have a say in what happens to it." She picked up the soup pot from the stove. For a second, I thought she was just clearing dishes. Then I saw the look in her eyes, the same look she used to get when she caught students cheating in her high school math class. Before I could react, the soup was already in the air. It was mushroom barley, still hot from last night's dinner. It hit my left cheek and shoulder, soaking through my blouse and burning like hellfire. But the physical pain was nothing compared to the realization that crashed over me at the same moment. My own mother had just assaulted me. In our kitchen, over a car and a credit card I wasn't willing to hand over to her stepdaughter. I didn't scream. I didn't even flinch. I just stood there, soup dripping down my collar, staring at the woman who had given birth to me, who was now glaring at me like I was a stranger who had broken into her house. Give Jessica everything she needs, Patricia said, her voice deadly calm now, or get out. I turned and walked upstairs. Behind me, I heard the garage door opening. Perfect timing. Jessica's white SUV pulling into the driveway just as I was being exiled from my own home. Flashback. The inheritance that never was. I need to tell you about my father, David Campbell, because understanding him is crucial to understanding why what happened next mattered so much. Dad was a quiet man who believed in hard work and keeping your word. He'd grown up during the Depression, the son of a factory worker who lost his job in 1932 and never quite recovered. When Dad married my mother in 1970, he promised her they'd never be poor, never be at the mercy of other people's whims. He kept that promise. Campbell Market opened in 1973 with one checkout counter, 2 employees, and a dream. Dad worked 16-hour days, learning every aspect of the business from inventory management to customer service. By the time I graduated high school in 1990, we had 4 full-time employees and were the go-to grocery store for our part of Sacramento. When Dad had a stroke in 2009, I was 29 and working as a bookkeeper for a small accounting firm. I took a leave of absence to help with the store, thinking it would be temporary. 15 years later, I was still there. Dad lived for 3 more years after the stroke, long enough to see me modernize our inventory system, negotiate better deals with suppliers, and increase our annual revenue by 30%. Long enough to pull me aside one afternoon and say, "Maggie, I need you to promise me something. Whatever happens, don't let them take what we built. The store is yours. I've made sure of it." He died on a Tuesday in March 2012. Patricia found his will a week later. In my room, I packed light. 1 overnight bag with the essentials, 2 changes of clothes, my laptop, my phone charger, and the few things in that house that were truly mine. At the bottom of my dresser drawer, wrapped in tissue paper, I found the handkerchief my father had embroidered for my 15th birthday. His handwriting in blue thread. "I see you, Maggie. Always." I folded it carefully and tucked it into my jacket pocket. The house was quiet when I came back downstairs. Through the window, I could see Patricia and Jessica in the driveway, their heads bent together in conversation. Jessica was nodding sympathetically, one hand on Patricia's arm, playing the role of the dutiful daughter, the role I had never been allowed to play. I walked to my car without looking back. The soup had dried sticky on my blouse, but my spine was straight. I had spent 34 years in that house, and I was leaving with one bag and a car that wouldn't be mine much longer. But I wasn't leaving empty-handed. In my laptop bag was a thumb drive containing 15 years of financial records, employee files, supplier contracts, and customer databases. Information that Jessica and Patricia didn't know existed. Information that would become very important in the weeks to come. The discovery, 2 hours later, I was sitting in the parking lot of a Starbucks, staring at my reflection in the rearview mirror. The left side of my face was red and blotchy where the soup had hit. My hair was still damp at the roots. I looked like a woman who had been crying, though I hadn't shed a single tear. My phone buzzed. A text from Sarah Mitchell, my former colleague from the accounting firm and the only person who had stayed in touch after I left to work at the store full-time. "Sarah, saw your mom and Jessica at the bank this morning. Looked official. Everything okay?" I stared at the message for a long time before responding. "Me, can we meet? Something's happened." Sarah, "Coffee shop on J Street in an hour?" Me, "I'll be there." Sarah was already waiting when I arrived, her dark hair pulled back in a ponytail, wearing the same concerned expression she'd had when she helped me through Dad's illness. She took one look at my face and said, "Jesus, Maggie, what happened?" I told her everything. The conversation that morning, the soup, the ultimatum. Sarah listened without interrupting, her expression growing more serious with each detail. "There's something else," she said when I finished. "Something I probably should have told you sooner." She reached into her purse and pulled out a manila envelope. "I've been keeping this for you. I wasn't sure if you'd ever need it, but..." Inside the envelope was a document I'd never seen before. A notarized agreement titled Asset Consolidation Transfer, dated 6 months ago. According to the papers, I had signed over my interest in Campbell Market to Patricia Williams, effective immediately. Except I had never signed any such document. The signature at the bottom of the page looked like mine from a distance, but I could see the differences. The way the M in Margaret slanted too far to the right. The W in Williams that ended with a flourish I never used. "Where did you get this?" I asked. "Jessica brought it to the bank where I work," Sarah said. "She needed it notarized for some kind of business loan application. The notary she brought with her didn't even check IDs. Just stamped it and left." I felt something cold settle in my stomach. They forged my signature. That's what I thought too. But I wasn't sure how to tell you, or if I even should. "You should have," I said, but without anger. "You absolutely should have." We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of what this meant settling between us. Then Sarah reached for her phone. "I still have a key to your storage unit," she said. "The one you rented when you moved back home to take care of your dad. Did you ever clean it out?" I shook my head. After Dad died, I had been too overwhelmed with grief and the demands of running the store to deal with the boxes of his papers and my old belongings stored in that climate-controlled unit across town. "Maybe it's time," Sarah said. Flashback. The man who saw it coming. The storage unit smelled like cardboard and forgotten time. Sarah and I had to move 3 boxes of Christmas decorations before we could reach what I was looking for. The wooden crate I had packed with Dad's most important papers after he died. Inside, beneath bank statements and old tax returns, I found the original ledger from Campbell Market. Dad had kept it by hand for the first 10 years, every sale and expense recorded in his careful cursive. My name appeared for the first time in 1995 when I helped out during summer breaks from college. By 2009, most of the entries were in my handwriting. But that wasn't the most important thing in the crate. At the very bottom, wrapped in a plastic bag, was an envelope with my name on it in Dad's handwriting. The envelope was sealed, but the paper was yellowed at the edges. I opened it carefully. Inside was a letter dated 2 weeks before Dad's stroke and a business card for Robert Harrison, attorney at law. "Maggie," the letter read, "if you're reading this, it means something has gone wrong with the store or the family. I hope I'm being paranoid, but I've learned that hope doesn't protect what matters most. Mr. Harrison has been my attorney for 20 years. He knows about the real will, the one Patricia doesn't know exists. He has copies of everything, the ownership documents, the business plans, the evidence of all the work you've done to save Campbell Market. If anyone tries to take what's yours, don't fight them alone. Go to him. Trust him like you trusted me." The next morning, Sarah and I drove to downtown Sacramento to find Robert Harrison. His office was in a brick building squeezed between a dental practice and a tax preparation service. The waiting room had the quiet elegance of old money and established reputation. Harrison himself was in his early 70s, with silver hair and sharp blue eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. When he heard my name, he didn't look surprised. "Margaret Campbell," he said, extending his hand. "I've been expecting you for quite some time." He led us into his private office and pulled a thick file from a locked cabinet behind his desk. The label read Campbell, David, Estate Planning and Business Succession. "Your father was a careful man," Harrison said, opening the file. "He came to see me in 2010, about a year after his stroke. He was concerned about what might happen to the business if something happened to him, and he was particularly worried about your mother's relationship with Jessica. He pulled out a document I recognized as Dad's will, but it was different from the version Patricia had probated. This one was longer, more detailed, and contained clauses I had never seen before. According to this version of your father's will, Harrison continued, you inherit not just his share of Campbell Market, but controlling interest in the business, provided you remain actively involved in its management, which you have for the past 15 years. I stared at the document, my father's signature clear and confident at the bottom. Why didn't this come out when he died? Because your mother found and filed a different will first. An earlier version from 2008 that didn't include these provisions. She probably didn't even know this one existed. Sarah leaned forward. Is that legal? Can you just file whichever will you want? Harrison's expression was grim. It's fraud. And combined with this forged asset transfer document you've brought me, we have grounds for both civil and criminal charges. I felt something shift inside me, like a gear clicking into place. For 3 months, I had been reacting to what Patricia and Jessica were doing to me. Now, for the first time, I was going to act. What do we do next? I asked. We gather evidence, Harrison said. And then we go to war. The investigation begins. Over the next 2 weeks, I lived in a sort of limbo. I had rented a small apartment across town, furnished it with the bare minimum from IKEA and secondhand stores. I worked my remote bookkeeping job during the day, and in the evenings, Sarah and I built our case. The first breakthrough came from Emma Rodriguez, a young woman who had worked at Campbell Market during college and was now finishing her graduate degree in business administration. I hadn't spoken to Emma in 2 years, but when I reached out to her, she responded immediately. I was wondering when someone would ask me about this, she said when we met at a coffee shop near UC Davis. I've been keeping screenshots of emails for months. Emma's evidence was devastating. She showed me dozens of emails between Jessica and Patricia, discussing how to transition Margaret out of active management and prepare the business for new leadership. There were drafts of press releases announcing Jessica as the new general manager of Campbell Market, written weeks before I was forced out. There were Facebook posts crediting Jessica with programs and initiatives I had developed. Most damaging of all was an email from Patricia to Jessica from just 2 days before the soup incident. M is becoming a problem. Talk to lawyer about forcing her out. Best option is to make home situation untenable. She'll leave on her own, and then we can proceed with business transfer. They planned this, I said, staring at the screen of Emma's phone. They planned all of it. Emma nodded. The worst part is how they're rewriting history. They uploaded a whole photo album to Facebook last week showing Jessica building the business. Half those photos are from events you organized. Would you be willing to testify about this? I asked. Absolutely. I've been waiting for someone to ask. The second breakthrough came from my own laptop. Going through 5 years of email correspondence, I found proof that I had been the primary point of contact for all of Campbell Market's major suppliers, had negotiated all the contracts personally, and had been the one dealing with the bank on the business loans. Jessica's name appeared nowhere in the official business communications. But the third breakthrough was the most personal, and it came from an unexpected source. The truth about Jessica. I was sorting through tax documents when my phone rang. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize, but when I answered, the voice was familiar. Mrs. Williams? This is Dr. Chen from Sacramento Family Services. We met when you brought your father in for his stroke rehabilitation. I remembered Dr. Chen, a kind woman in her 50s who had helped Dad through his physical therapy. Yes, of course. How can I help you? I'm calling because I've been following the news about Campbell Market's new management on social media, and I thought you should know something about Jessica Campbell. She was a client of ours 2 years ago. The story Dr. Chen told me changed everything. Jessica had come to Family Services in 2022, claiming to be the victim of elder abuse by her stepfather. She said he had manipulated her mother into changing her will, cutting Jessica out of an inheritance she was promised. The stepfather had been David Campbell. She wanted us to help her contest the will, Dr. Chen explained. She claimed your father had isolated your mother and convinced her to leave everything to you instead of splitting it with the stepchildren. But that's not true, I said. Dad died before Jessica even met my mother. That's what we discovered when we investigated. Jessica's timeline didn't match the public records. She withdrew her complaint when we asked for documentation. I probably shouldn't be telling you this, but when I saw those Facebook posts claiming she was the co-founder of your family's business, I thanked Dr. Chen and hung up, my mind racing. Jessica hadn't just been manipulating Patricia for the past year. She had been planning this for much longer, researching our family, looking for weaknesses she could exploit. That evening, I called Harrison and told him everything. He listened in silence, occasionally making notes. "This changes our strategy," he said when I finished. "We're not just dealing with fraud anymore. This is a pattern of deliberate deception designed to steal your inheritance. Jessica targeted your mother specifically because she knew about the business and saw an opportunity. What do we do? Tomorrow, we file a civil suit. Tonight, I'm calling the Sacramento County District Attorney's Office." Flashback. The high school teacher who mistook control for love. Understanding my mother requires going back to before I was born, to the woman she was before grief and fear changed her into someone I barely recognized. Patricia Williams Ney Patterson was born in 1954, the eldest daughter of a factory foreman and a seamstress. She was the first in her family to go to college, earning a degree in mathematics from Sacramento State in 1976. She became a high school teacher at the same school where she would work for the next 35 years. By all accounts, she was good at her job. Demanding but fair, with high expectations for her students and the ability to break down complex problems into manageable steps. She met my father at a teachers' union barbecue in 1979. He was there as a guest of another teacher, an awkward but sweet man who owned a small grocery store and didn't know the difference between sine and cosine. They married in 1980. I was born 2 years later. For 25 years, our family worked like a well-calibrated machine. Dad ran the store, Mom taught mathematics, and I grew up knowing exactly what was expected of me: good grades, respectful behavior, and eventually, a practical career that would make my parents proud. Everything changed when Dad had his stroke. The man Patricia had married was decisive, competent, strong. The man who came home from the hospital was confused, frustrated, and frightened by his own limitations. Patricia, who had spent her entire career believing that every problem had a solution if you just applied the right method, suddenly found herself married to a problem she couldn't solve. She threw herself into managing his care, his recovery, and the business with the same intensity she had once brought to teaching. She made lists, created schedules, assigned tasks. When Dad died 3 years later, she simply transferred that need for control to the next available target, me. And then Jessica appeared. The legal battle officially began on a Tuesday in November. Harrison filed 3 separate actions: a civil suit claiming fraud and elder abuse, a motion to invalidate the forged asset transfer, and a formal complaint to the California State Bar Association about the notary who had stamped the false documents. The response from Patricia and Jessica's lawyer was swift and predictable. They denied all wrongdoing and filed a countersuit claiming harassment and defamation. They also filed a restraining order to prevent me from coming within 100 yards of Campbell Market or the family home. "Let them," Harrison said when he called to tell me about the restraining order. "It just makes them look more guilty." The first court hearing was scheduled for early December. In the meantime, Harrison advised me to document everything, avoid all contact with Patricia and Jessica, and prepare for what he called escalation tactics. He was right about the escalation. The smear campaign. It started with social media. Jessica created a series of posts on the Campbell Market Facebook page, painting me as a disgruntled former employee who was trying to destroy a family business out of spite. She shared photos of herself working in the store, smiling with customers, organizing charity drives I had actually planned and executed. The comments were brutal. Neighbors and family friends who had known me since childhood were calling me ungrateful, jealous, and worse. Someone I suspected Jessica had created a fake account and was posting detailed accusations about my mental state, my finances, and my relationship with my father. Patricia joined in with a carefully worded Facebook post about the pain of having a child turn against their family and the importance of forgiveness and healing. The post was shared dozens of times, each share adding more comments about my alleged character flaws. But the social media campaign was just the beginning. My bank account was frozen after Patricia filed a claim saying I had stolen money from the store. My car insurance was canceled because Jessica reported my vehicle as stolen. Someone again, probably Jessica, contacted my remote bookkeeping clients and told them I was in legal trouble and couldn't be trusted with financial information. The most painful escalation came 2 weeks before the court hearing. I was walking out of the grocery store, not Campbell Market, obviously, when someone called my name. I turned to see Mrs. Rodriguez, Emma's mother, hurrying toward me with a concerned expression. "Margaret, dear," she said, catching her breath. "I wanted to ask you about something. Patricia came to see me yesterday. She said you've been stealing from the store for years, and now you're trying to blame it on Jessica. She seemed so worried about you. She asked if I'd seen any signs that you were having mental health issues." The conversation continued for 10 more excruciating minutes. Mrs. Rodriguez clearly didn't believe Patricia's story, but she was confused and worried. How many other people had Patricia approached with similar tales? That night, I called Harrison and told him what was happening. "Character assassination," he said matter-of-factly. "It's straight out of the abuser's playbook. They're trying to isolate you, make you doubt yourself, convince everyone around you that you're the problem. Is it working? Doesn't matter. The beauty of a legal case is that the truth is determined by evidence, not public opinion. And we have all the evidence we need." Flashback. The stepdaughter who learned to weaponize sympathy, Jessica Campbell, was born in 1987 in Stockton, California. Her mother, Linda, was a single parent who worked as a hotel manager and struggled to make ends meet. Jessica was an only child, bright enough to do well in school, but never quite able to hold down part-time jobs or maintain long-term friendships. According to the background check Harrison commissioned, Jessica had a pattern. She would attach herself to older women teachers, supervisors, family friends, and present herself as a surrogate daughter figure. She was charming, helpful, and always had a sob story ready about her difficult childhood and her mother's financial struggles. These relationships always followed the same trajectory. Jessica would gradually increase her requests for help with small loans, temporary housing, introductions to useful contacts. When her benefactors eventually said no or started asking questions, Jessica would disappear, often leaving behind debts and damaged relationships. She met my mother at a grief counseling group in 2020. Patricia had joined the group 2 years after Dad's death, still struggling with the loss and with her fears about aging alone. Jessica, who was there ostensibly to deal with her mother's death from cancer, immediately recognized an opportunity. Linda Campbell, it turned out, had left Jessica very little when she died. No house, no savings, no business to inherit. But Patricia Williams had all of those things, plus a daughter who lived in the family home and could potentially interfere with Jessica's plans. The seduction was slow and careful. Jessica volunteered to help Patricia with grocery shopping, home repairs, technology issues. She listened to Patricia's complaints about my work schedule, my lack of a traditional family, my failure to provide grandchildren. She slowly, carefully, began to suggest that perhaps Patricia deserved a daughter who appreciated everything she had to offer. It took 3 years, but eventually Jessica moved into our guest room temporarily while she looked for an apartment. She never found one. The court hearing was scheduled for December 15th at 9 a.m. Harrison and I met in his office an hour beforehand to review our strategy. The evidence was overwhelming. Forged documents, fraudulent bank transfers, a pattern of deceptive behavior stretching back years. "Remember," Harrison told me as we walked to the courthouse, "this is just a preliminary hearing. We're not trying to win the whole case today. We're just trying to get an injunction to stop them from doing any more damage to the business while we prepare for trial." The courtroom was smaller than I had expected, with wood paneling and fluorescent lights that made everyone look slightly green. Patricia and Jessica sat at the defendant's table with their lawyer, a thin man in his 40s who kept checking his phone. They didn't look at me when I walked in. The hearing lasted 2 hours. Harrison presented our evidence methodically: the forged asset transfer, the false business registrations, the email conversations Emma had provided, the banking records showing unauthorized transfers. Jessica's lawyer tried to muddy the waters with claims about my mental state and allegations of financial mismanagement. But Judge Morrison wasn't interested in speculation. Based on the evidence presented, the judge said at the end, I'm issuing a temporary restraining order preventing further changes to Campbell Market's business registration or banking arrangements. I'm also appointing a forensic accountant to audit all financial transactions involving the business for the past 2 years. Jessica's face went white. Patricia just stared straight ahead, her jaw tight with suppressed rage. Additionally, Judge Morrison continued, I'm ordering the immediate return of all Campbell Market assets to joint control pending the resolution of this case. Ms. Campbell and Ms. Williams are prohibited from making any business decisions without written consent from Ms. Margaret Williams. We had won the first round, but as we left the courthouse, Harrison cautioned me not to celebrate yet. They're going to appeal, he said, and they're going to get desperate. Desperate people do desperate things. He was right. The desperate gambit. The forensic accounting report was devastating. Over the past 18 months, Jessica had transferred nearly $75,000 from Campbell Market's accounts to her personal credit cards, claiming the expenditures were for business development and marketing initiatives. She had also been paying herself a salary of $4,000 per month as general manager, a position that had never been officially created and for which she had no employment contract. More damaging still, the accountant found evidence that Patricia had been systematically removing inventory from the store without recording the transactions, effectively stealing from her own business to cover Jessica's expenses. Harrison filed an amended complaint adding embezzlement to the list of charges. The total amount involved was now over $100,000, elevating the case from civil fraud to criminal theft. That's when Jessica made her final, desperate play. I was leaving my apartment on a Saturday morning when a young man approached me in the parking lot. He identified himself as a private investigator working for Jessica's defense team. Ms. Williams, he said, my client would like to propose a settlement. She's prepared to drop all claims to Campbell Market and pay restitution for any financial irregularities, in exchange for your agreement not to pursue criminal charges. You can talk to my lawyer, I told him. She's also prepared to provide you with information about your mother's mental health, he continued. Information that might be relevant to the question of whether Mrs. Patricia Williams was competent to make business decisions over the past 2 years. I stopped walking. What kind of information? Medical records. Doctor's appointments your mother has been hiding from you. Prescriptions for medication to treat early-stage dementia. The implication was clear. Jessica was offering to throw Patricia under the bus, to claim that my elderly mother hadn't been mentally competent when she made the decision to bring Jessica into the business. It was a brilliant strategy, actually. If Patricia was deemed incompetent, then all of her business decisions could be invalidated, including the ones that benefited Jessica. Jessica would lose everything, but she would avoid prison time for fraud and embezzlement. I looked at the private investigator and said, tell your client I'll give her an answer by Monday. That night, I sat in my apartment and thought about everything that had happened. The soup in my face, the forged signatures, the stolen money, the public humiliation. I thought about my father's letter and his trust that I would protect what he had built. I thought about Patricia, alone in that big house with a woman who saw her as nothing more than a means to an end. And I realized that Jessica had made one crucial miscalculation. Flashback, the daughter who finally learned to say no. I was 7 years old the first time I remember being afraid of my mother's anger. I had tracked mud through the house after playing in the backyard, leaving a trail of brown footprints across her just-mopped kitchen floor. Patricia didn't yell. She never yelled. Instead, she got very quiet and very still, the way she did when a student gave the wrong answer to a math problem she had explained 5 times already. Margaret, she said in a voice like winter, do you think I cleaned this floor for my own enjoyment? I knew the answer she wanted, and I gave it to her. I apologized, got the mop, and cleaned up my mess while she watched me with that expression of disappointed resignation that became so familiar over the years. For the next 45 years, I would see that same expression whenever I failed to meet her expectations. When I dated a boy she didn't approve of. When I chose business management over teaching. When I didn't get married and give her grandchildren. When I spent too much time at the store and not enough time at home. I learned to read her moods like other people read the weather. I learned to anticipate what she wanted before she asked for it. I learned to swallow my own opinions and desires to avoid that look of cold disappointment. But sitting in my apartment that night, thinking about Jessica's offer, I realized something. I was 52 years old, and I was still afraid of disappointing my mother. I was still changing my behavior to avoid that look of cold disapproval. Even now, even after everything she had done to me, part of me was considering Jessica's deal because it would be easier than facing Patricia's anger in court. That's when I understood what Dad had really been trying to tell me in his letter. He hadn't left me those documents just to protect the business. He had left them to protect me from a lifetime of bending myself into shapes that would never quite fit. On Monday morning, I called Harrison and told him my decision. Then I called the private investigator. Tell your client, I said, that if she has evidence of my mother's mental incompetence, she should have thought of that before she spent 2 years manipulating and exploiting her. Tell her that my answer is no. Ms. Williams, the investigator said, I think you should consider. Tell her, I interrupted, that I'll see her in court. The trial. The trial began on January 15th, exactly 6 months after the morning Patricia threw soup in my face. The courtroom was packed with people I recognized as former Campbell Market employees, family friends, neighbors who had followed the story in the local news. Patricia and Jessica sat at the defendant's table looking smaller than I remembered. Patricia's hair had gone completely gray since I'd last seen her, and Jessica had lost weight, her clothes hanging loose on her frame. The prosecution's case was methodical and devastating. They presented the forged documents, the email evidence Emma had provided, the financial records showing systematic theft. They called witnesses who testified about Jessica's pattern of behavior with other vulnerable women, about Patricia's increasing isolation from old friends and family members. Emma Rodriguez testified about the emails she had saved, about the way Jessica had spoken about me and about the business. Dr. Chen from Family Services testified about Jessica's earlier, failed attempt to contest Dad's will. The defense's strategy was exactly what I had expected. They claimed that I was a disgruntled daughter who had manipulated my aging father into cutting out other family members, and that Jessica was simply trying to protect Patricia from my financial abuse. Jessica testified on her own behalf, and I had to admit she was compelling. She spoke softly, occasionally dabbing at her eyes with a tissue, describing how worried she had been about Patricia's welfare and how frightened she was of my increasingly erratic behavior. But then Harrison began his cross-examination. Miss Campbell, he said, approaching the witness stand, you testified that you were concerned about my client's treatment of her mother. Can you explain why, if you were so concerned, you waited until after you had moved into Mrs. Williams' home to express these concerns? I wanted to understand the situation better before I acted. I see. And during this time when you were understanding the situation, did you discuss your concerns with Mrs. Williams' doctor? Her friends? Any other family members? I thought it was better to handle it within the family. Harrison nodded and picked up a document from his table. Ms. Campbell, do you recognize this email, dated June 15th of last year? Jessica leaned forward to look at the paper. Her face went pale. I might have written something like that. This is an email from you to your boyfriend, Marcus Stewart, isn't it? Would you like me to read the relevant portion to the jury? Jessica's lawyer objected, but Judge Morrison overruled him. Harrison read aloud. The old lady is completely under my thumb now. All I have to do is convince her that the daughter is stealing from the business, and she'll sign over everything. It's almost too easy. By Christmas, I'll own half of a grocery store worth $2 million, and Maggie will be out on her ass where she belongs. The courtroom was completely silent. Jessica sat frozen in the witness chair, her mouth open but no words coming out. Ms. Campbell, Harrison continued, does this sound like the language of someone who is concerned about an elderly woman's welfare? The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. They found Jessica guilty on all counts: fraud, embezzlement, elder abuse, and identity theft. They also found Patricia liable for civil damages, though they recommended leniency due to her status as a victim of Jessica's manipulation. Jessica was sentenced to 4 years in prison and ordered to pay restitution of $127,000. Patricia was given 2 years probation and required to undergo counseling for victims of financial abuse. As for Campbell Market, the court ruled that the business belonged entirely to me, as specified in my father's true will. Patricia's ownership stake, which she had acquired through marriage, was forfeited due to her participation in the fraud. The resolute, 6 months after the trial, I reopened Campbell Market under its original name. I had spent the time renovating the interior, updating the inventory systems, and rebuilding relationships with suppliers who had been confused by the conflicting messages they had received during the legal battle. Emma Rodriguez came back to work for me, now as assistant manager while she finished her MBA. Several former employees returned as well, eager to be part of the store's fresh start. Patricia never came to see the reopening. She had moved to a smaller apartment across town and, according to mutual acquaintances, was slowly rebuilding her life with the help of the court-ordered counselor. I heard that she had rejoined the grief counseling group where she had first met Jessica, this time as a support for other women who had been targeted by financial predators. I thought about reaching out to her, but Harrison advised against it. "Give her time," he said. "And give yourself time too. Some relationships can be repaired, but they all need to prove they're worth repairing first." Epilogue. 3 years later, I'm writing this on a Sunday morning in my apartment, which I kept even after the business became profitable again. It's small but peaceful, with a view of the garden courtyard where I grow the herbs I use for cooking. The soup bowl Patricia sent me, yes, she eventually sent back the bowl, clean and carefully wrapped, sits on my kitchen counter. I use it sometimes, not out of nostalgia, but because it's a good bowl for soup. Campbell Market is thriving. We're known now for our local products, our community events, and our commitment to fair prices for working families. Emma graduated with her MBA last year and is now a full partner in the business. We're planning to open a second location next year. I speak at women's conferences sometimes about financial abuse and family manipulation. It's not something I ever expected to do, but I've learned that telling your story can help other people find the courage to tell theirs. 2 months ago, I ran into Patricia at the farmer's market downtown. She was standing at a vegetable stall, examining tomatoes with the same critical eye she had always brought to produce shopping. She looked older but healthier somehow, less pinched around the edges. We didn't speak, but we nodded to each other. A small acknowledgement that we had both survived what happened between us. As I walked away, I realized I wasn't angry anymore. The anger had been necessary for a while. It gave me the energy to fight when fighting was what I needed to do. But I didn't need it anymore. That afternoon, I cleaned out the last box of Dad's papers from my closet. At the bottom, I found a photograph I had forgotten about, Dad and me at Campbell Market's 25th anniversary celebration in 1998. I'm wearing my high school graduation dress, and he's wearing his best tie, the blue one with the tiny anchors that Mom always said was too casual for important occasions. We're standing in front of the store, both of us squinting in the California sunshine, both of us smiling like we shared a secret. In the photo, I can see what Dad saw when he looked at me. Not the daughter who disappointed her mother by not becoming a teacher, but the woman who would carry on what he had built. I keep that photo on my desk now, next to the handkerchief he embroidered for my 15th birthday. I see you, Maggie. Always. He was right. He did see me. And after 52 years of trying to be the daughter everyone else wanted, I finally learned to see myself too. Sometimes the story you've waited your whole life to tell starts when you stop waiting for someone else to give you permission to tell it. Sometimes it starts with a bowl of soup thrown in anger and ends with the same bowl, cleaned and returned, sitting quietly on your counter. Sometimes it starts when you finally realize that love isn't supposed to hurt, and family isn't supposed to be a prison, and you are allowed to save yourself even when no one else will. Especially when no one else will. I'm not telling you this story to make you feel sorry for me, or to convince you that all families are toxic, or to suggest that cutting ties is always the answer. I'm telling you this story because I know there are women reading this who recognize themselves in it. Women who have spent years accommodating, compromising, and shrinking themselves to fit into spaces that were never meant for them. I'm telling you this because I want you to know that it's possible to love someone and still protect yourself from them. It's possible to honor your family's legacy without sacrificing your own future. It's possible to be grateful for what you receive while still refusing to accept what you don't deserve. And I'm telling you this because I want you to know that sometimes the most radical thing you can do is simply stop accepting unacceptable behavior. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself and for the people hurting you is to step away and let them experience the natural consequences of their choices. The soup bowl sits on my counter, clean and useful again. But it doesn't define our story anymore. I do. That's what freedom looks like, sometimes. Not a grand gesture or a dramatic confrontation, but just a quiet morning when you realize you're no longer afraid of your own life. When you wake up and make coffee and look out the window and think, this is mine. I built this. I chose this. When you finally understand that you were never the problem that needed solving. You were always the solution that was waiting to be discovered.